Straight away. Fantastic. So it looks like everybody can hear me, so I'm just going to begin. So just to introduce myself, my name is Chantal Newton and I'm the Marketing Manager at the UK Contact Centre Forum. Thank you for taking the time to join our webinar session today, which is being hosted in partnership with Contact Centre Panel. And today, in this session, we'll be discussing more insights into outsourcing. Just a couple of housekeeping points to go through before we begin. We do have some some polls for you to participate in today. So when prompted, the polls should appear automatically on your screen, and please vote when we say they're live. After the presentation today, we will be holding a full Q&A session. Please post any questions that you may have for our panel in the Q&A box provided. The webinar session is expected to last approximately 45 minutes. If you're unable to stay the whole session, the webinar is being recorded and the link will be emailed to all participants within 24 hours of the webinar ending. So to get today's session started, I'm going to pass you over to our session chair, Jonathan Billing from Contact Centre Panel. Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Chantal. Hello, everybody. Welcome today to our webinar. I've got a really exciting topic today. We've got some excellent panelists from some leading organisations. The objective of today's webinar is to gain some insight into outsourcing across different geographies. And like I said, we've got some excellent panelists who will be able to give their views and insight into their areas of operation. So it's a big topic. We're going to try and cover as much as we can. If there are areas which we don't manage to cover and you've got questions on, please ask those through the Q&A, and we'll try and get to you after the session, if not within the session. So I'm going to start by introducing each of the panelists and asking them to give a bit of an overview about their business and themselves. I'm going to start off with Phil Kitchen. Well, do you want to give us a bit of an insight into what the Contact Centre Panel does and how they help customers?
Yeah, delighted to. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be part of the panel. So just a brief introduction. CCP fundamentally is a network of over 130 outsourcers, best of breed, all three of which panel members are clearly part of that. And we help clients find the right contact centre partner.
Great. Dino, do you want to give us a bit of insight into your organisation?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. So Venture is a multilingual customer management outsourcer. We have in the region of about 1,800 staff currently, and we provide customer service for a host of well-known brands with a particularly strong focus on retail. We currently operate out of 2 sites in the UK, and they're augmented with significant home working capability. And we have 2 further sites planned later this year, 1 nearshore and 1 offshore.
Great. So William, can you give us some information about Ascensos and any information about the business and your role?
Sure, very happy to be here today as well, Jonathan. So good to see everybody. Ascensos is an independent provider of customer management and engagement services. We support clients, customers around the world globally, from our locations in the UK and nearshore in Eastern Europe and in Western Asia. Very much looking at the bespoke solutions that we can offer our clients exclusively in e-commerce and e-retail around that hybrid of using technology, using people-led advisor services, and of course work from home, as we all do these days, to ensure that customers get the best commercial flexibility that they need to grow in the markets that they choose.
Great, thank you, William. Robin, can you give us some insight into our works and your role?
Sure. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Robin Hoekstra, and I'm the co-founder and chief executive officer of Outsource Contact Centre in South Africa. I'm also the chairman of the regional industry body called BPESA here in South Africa, and sit on the exco of our national governing body. Outworks is located on the southeast coast in a city called Durban. We've been operating since 2013. We've got about 1,500 advisors, and we operate out of 3 delivery centres 24/7, providing services predominantly to the UK, USA, and Australia. We're an English-centric BPO. We're a provider offering a range of competencies covering customer services, in and outbound sales, voice and non-voice, and front and back office. And our channels include things like financial services and insurance, retail, media and communications, telecommunications, medical. And whilst we only offer English from South Africa, we do deliver multiple languages from both Eastern Europe and South America.
Great, thank you, Robin. Okay, so I'm going to start off the conversation discussion looking at geographies. When we talk about sort of UK nearshore, offshore contact center operations, it's very easy to generalise. But I really wanted to get your thoughts on what the merits are for those particular locations. Obviously, with each of the panelists having their own perspective. So Dino, could you give us a view on from a UK perspective the merits of having or using an outsourcer that's based in the UK?
I mean, this is a subject that has been spoken about a lot in recent years, but I think everybody in our industry will have a view on this, and of course it's easy to generalize. I mean, for me, poor customer service is poor customer service no matter where it happens, and that can happen in the UK too. So clearly it's about you know, the chosen outsourcer and the quality of that outsourcer and their people. But for me, the UK will always come out on top on quality amongst a host of other parameters. And you know, if it's a commercially viable solution. But certainly, Jonathan, I don't know if you want to talk about other parts, but certainly Eastern Europe has its merits in terms of lower cost multilingual capability. But of course, you have to be sure that you're going to get the language capability from there.
Yeah. Well, maybe William, it's a good time to ask William that question, because I know, you know, Sensos have operations across Europe.
Yeah, for us, the real attraction of the nearshore is, given the work we do, particularly in e-commerce, it's about a mixture of proximity, but also that access to multilingual capability. I think where you've got a client and a brand which has a real spread, a generous spread, if you like, of all the European languages and some minor languages as well, I think being able to access as many of those native speakers as possible is the benefit of the Eastern European sites. And we very much feel that the infrastructure that we have in Eastern Europe is pretty much second to none, particularly where we are in Bucharest, for example, which has recently been made it's a long title, the EU HQ for the cybersecurity competencies. It's probably got a better fiber connectivity than the UK. As well as a rich pool of employees that, for example, in Bucharest, I think it's 33% of the entire university population of Romania is actually in Bucharest. So there are just a few of the reasons why we certainly feel there's a huge benefit to clients that have that multilingual requirement of doing this sort of nearshore.
Okay, yeah. So Robin, just from a South Africa perspective, as an offshore provider, what's your thoughts?
Well, you know, I think the one thing that we need to consider is the requirement from potentially the UK and let's call it the US more importantly, is that South Africa is unashamedly an English-centric destination. And I think what South Africa has proven, and specifically if we speak to the last 18 months or so, the ability for South Africa to be resilient in the face of a global pandemic like we've just experienced and are experiencing at the moment. So I think from a geographic risk mitigation point of view, timelines follow the sun. South Africa offers a really amazing offshore destination to many different geos. And I think with South Africa and the history that we have between South Africa and the UK specifically, because that's our target audience today, we've got over 20 years worth of experience in operating between the UK and South Africa. You know, we have an amazing talent pool in South Africa, and I think a lot of times our talent pool is underestimated. You know, if you look at the accent neutral capability of our staff, the levels of EQ and empathy that we have here in South Africa. So, you know, again, people sometimes talk about distance, and if you talk to people in North America, more so than in the UK, you know, they will talk about the fact that nearshore is a lot more easy for them to travel to. Onshore has obviously its advantages. But the distance, if handled correctly, isn't really an issue, because the majority of our clients either engage by sending some of their execs over here, some of their trainers, some of their key account managers, and they spend time within the business. And that transition is really managed well. With the onset of the virtual presence capability that we now have, in our ability to almost be in each other's faces on a daily basis, I think the concept of offshoring, nearshoring, or onshoring, home away from home, it's really not any longer an arm's length away. So I think there are many advantages. I mean, I can speak, and I'm hopefully we'll get on to the key advantages of the various cities within South Africa, but I won't speak about that now, and hopefully we can circle back to that just now. But I think the key advantages for South Africa are its timeline, its location to the United Kingdom, its incredible talent pool, and its sophistication in terms of the infrastructure and its resilience, as it's proven over the last 18 months.
Yeah. So Phil, with the contact centre panel being having an agnostic view of the market, what's your thoughts on view?
Yeah, I think Dino made. Sorry, thanks, JB. I think Dino made the point right at the very start. I think it's quite difficult to generalise. I think we clearly work in all these regions, and clients have different requirements and demands, which therefore, allows us to identify the appropriate geographies, and those demands might be cost, they might be cultural alignment, which no doubt we'll talk about a little bit later. There might be solution, which again we'll talk about a little bit later. We get clients that are clearly very UK centric, and we're working on behalf of a big charity at the moment that wants the operation based solely here in the UK. But I think what I would say is that we get quite a few clients that maybe have a preconceived idea, or a preconceived idea of the potential destination for either their sales or their customer service work. And as we work our way through the process, often that the decision is not one that they felt they were going to make right at the very start in terms of geography. So I think, and just to pick up on William's point, I think, and again, I no doubt we'll pick up on this a little bit later on, because, that Central European language hub is becoming more relevant in our opinion, and we're doing a lot of work with clients that are looking to place work there. And no doubt William can comment more on this, and already has done with respect to Bucharest, but there is a range of language availability in the different countries. So quite clearly, prospective clients have to be very careful, especially if they're working at scale. So I don't think you can generalize. I think countries have, different specializations and skills and requirements, et cetera, et cetera. So that would be our general view on it, I think, Jonathan.
Okay, yeah. And I know we touched on it, Robin, but looking at sort of South Africa itself, is there any areas within, or differences within different areas or conurbations within South Africa? Do you notice, or what's your views on that?
Sure. I mean, if we look at the BPO market as a whole in South Africa, we've got a couple of really key cities and then a couple of emerging cities. We've got 6 key cities with both domestic and captive and international BPO operations. Onshore captive operations are managed out of. Each region has obviously got its own geographical and lifestyle offerings, and these cities have different areas of government support, whether it's in skills training, special economic zones, various BPO, GBS parks, widespread broadband and connectivity. What we have seen is that many BPOs who choose to locate in South Africa start off in one region, and then they land up spreading to other cities and access those skill pools and incentives to spread their risk, and also look at various DR solutions, and also to access a broader domestic client base. Cape Town in the Western Cape, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, was the initiator of much of the South African BPO success. And although the city still hosts the predominance of the seats servicing the international market, this has dropped to below 47%, with Durban having jumped from 24 to 37% in the past 3 years, which is quite significant growth down here on the East Coast. Johannesburg is the majority of our domestic and captive operations, with about 65% of the local market, and supports about 15% of the export market, with the Eastern Cape, with the 2 cities there, Port Elizabeth and East London, who are newcomers and considered viable, what we refer to as tier 2 alternatives, with just under 2% of our export market and growing. We've seen a number of BPOs looking at alternative cities for growth and to access alternative skill pools. And what the sector is well aware of is that we don't want to see one region over trading. So we drive up costs, which is why provincial government and cities have got a number of GBS focused initiatives, such as skills, work skills, work readiness programs, and skills interventions to make sure that we try and find some parity between these major cities. The GBS sector is recognized on the national economic agenda as a priority sector and is being supported as such by our provincial, local, and national government. So, you know, each city has got its own unique capability. Cape Town being the nostalgic winelands, Table Mountain and Robben Island with Nelson Mandela affinities, and Durban on the East Coast, which originally the sales hub of South Africa, which has now really found parity and balance between customer service and sales, and Johannesburg, which has generally always been recognized as the sort of financial hub and more complex work. So I think each city has got its own unique offerings.
Yeah. And from a resourcing perspective, is there particular areas which are easier to source the right skilled people, or does it tend to be, is there no difference?
Well, I don't think there's really any difference between any of the regions, to be frank.
Yeah.
I think, as I say, the customer centricity or customer experience centricity is sort of really balanced right throughout the country now. You know, if you go back 10 years, maybe you would have said that Cape Town is the hub of customer service, Durban is the hub of sales, and Johannesburg is the hub of financial services. But I think there's been an evolution where there's a lot more balance, not only between us as operators locating in various cities, but also for clients looking at different skill pools and not just sticking with one demographic or group of people. So I think that the availability of skills, whether it's the Western Cape down here on the East Coast or in Johannesburg, the availability of a willing group of skilled and talented youngsters is really there. We've got significant unemployment between 18 and 35. I think our unemployment is close to 60%.
Yeah.
So there are, you know, well-trained, well-educated, hungry, and desperately enthusiastic youngsters who are ready and willing and able to work.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for that, Robin. So William, just out of interest, Sensos they're based operations in Turkey and Romania. Why didn't you look at sort of Western Europe? What was the thought of going for those locations as opposed to those in Western Europe?
Yeah, sure. I think the real decision was around that commercial flexibility which nearshore offers. I think even several years ago, talking to some clients, not clients of Sensos, but previous clients I was engaged with, there was already a sense that some of the Western European locations for multilingual were starting to heat up in terms of their price points, and they were getting to the point really there was a parity with the UK. Obviously not across all sectors or all capabilities, but there was generally a sense that it was, I guess, a slightly overheated market. And also there's a lot, I think, in my experience, a lot more movement between the Western European countries than there is in the East. And again, that affects retention, that affects, the peaks and troughs in the availability of quality staff, simply because they are moving from perhaps one part of Portugal, for example, to another, or from Portugal to another country.
Yeah.
Eastern Europe, in our experience, is better in that regard. And also, I visited Kosovo about a year and a half ago, and I was hugely impressed with what they've got in terms of, again, that inward and outward perspective, but wanting to bring what they learn from beyond their particular region back into Kosovo. And I think that is a character almost of the what we see in Eastern Europe, which I think is really important to what we offer.
Are there any sort of, I mean, you probably don't want to say this, but any sort of negatives for those locations in particular, or
the traffic can be a bit bad in Bucharest, if I'm absolutely honest. But then, these days traffic's bad anywhere. It is where I am at the moment in London, but that's about it. And I think the other thing I'd probably add then is we're also looking, particularly with e-commerce, what's happening out east, hence our setting up in Istanbul. And we're in Western Asia, so we're on
Yeah.
the Asian side of Istanbul, and that again gives us access to Middle Eastern languages as well as Russian and languages which are starting to come again a bit more to the fore in what, you know, particularly e-commerce and online organizations want. Specifically, when you think of what's happened with these organizations after the year we've had and their huge growth.
And then recruitment is that how's that?
Recruitment. I just spoke to a recruitment person yesterday about Eastern Europe. It's very competitive, and that's really because we do. Well, what they're seeing is a Brexit influx of many people going back to the countries where they come from over the last year and a half or so on. So there's we don't find it difficult, but and certainly the quality is there anyway in quite a broad labor pool. But yes, it's recruitment is recruitment. There's good days and bad days, if you like, but certainly we haven't had a problem.
Okay, so just want to ask a question around channels. So is there an argument to place different channels within different geographies? So Dino, do you want to give us your view on that?
I'm not so sure about channels as such. I mean, you could clearly argue digital channels are maybe from, the written skills side of things are better placed in the UK. Certainly, there are various skills that you would, even if you take a destination like the Caribbean, you would say, look, if you've got sales type work, then you might consider Jamaica over Barbados, for example. And, there are certain nuances around the type of work that you might put in certain destinations. I think that, there is an argument to say that you would want the sort of more digital work, particularly that, that the written word over here in the UK is going to be better. So there's always an argument to that effect. But I'd say it's more around the skills and the type of services you want to outsource as opposed to channels. Yeah.
To Phil, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think interesting what Dino was saying there, because funnily enough, we find sometimes the challenge is moving voice initially offshore. Now, I know Robin will comment on this, and we have a lot of voice now offshore, but often that is transition. So some of our clients might start, funnily enough, with some of the channels that you've mentioned there, Dino. They might start with email and chat, and then over time they might move voice as a channel. And we've got a particular client out in South Africa that started with 10 heads and is now at 90 heads, including some heads on voice. But it's taken a bit of time for them to get their confidence up. I think that's probably right. I mean, it was a rapid movement to get voice up and running. So within a relatively short period of time, they did that. But I think we definitely see that. We definitely see the whole point about transition. So the movement of, irrespective of what the channel is, from the UK to a near or far shore offshore operation. The only other thing I'd like to mention is that I think, from a voice perspective, we're definitely finding India as a bit of a challenge. There's no doubt about that. Interesting to see what other people have got to say on that. But yeah, so I think they would be our views from our clients anyway.
Yeah. So William, what are your thoughts?
Similar, but I would say I think there is a great opportunity. If we remember that these contracts run for 3 years, 5 years, there's great opportunity with clients to look at the ways in which channels might start onshore, might move slightly near shore for some of them. And then I know for us, we've had great success with some clients that we built up small in the UK, and then we've migrated all of it to our near shore destinations. But that really does take real buy-in from the client and tenure of clients, so they can really understand, and we can work with them to understand what is the problem you're trying to solve for. Have you got a robust business plan that we can speak to and work with you on that allows us to go on that journey with you over the lifetime of the contract? So I would say there's definitely an argument for non-voice where you get commercial flexibility, and that might be near shore or offshore. But I think as time goes on, I think we'll find more and more there's the ability, depending on sector scale and complexity, to do quite a bit nearshore, even including voice.
Yeah, absolutely. So Robin, Phil mentioned South Africa. Is there any nervousness around placing voice within South Africa? Have you seen that or experienced that?
No, not at all. I mean, quite the contrary. The predominance of the export work that is done in South Africa is voice.
Yeah.
Right? South Africa was recently announced as the top global BPO offshore front office CX location by the Rand Strategic Advisory Omnibus Survey, and this speaks volumes for our CX voice capabilities. The country's been complimented and selected based on neutral accent, and English is our key language, where we service the United Kingdom, and 63% of South Africa's BPO export market is serviced in English. So, you know, for us, we have absolutely no reluctance to it. You know, we've got quite an eclectic mix of clients in Outwork specifically, where we've had clients who are concerned about placing voice in South Africa because of the Africanized accent. And what we found in almost every case without exception is that once they've experienced the nuances of our accent, they're actually quite intrigued by it. And for a lot of the customer service side of it, we've actually been complimented, and it's been quite a hook and a key feature on why people are attracted to put some work out here. I mean, besides the English part of it, I think the South African are generally quite friendly people. And I think the levels of EQ and empathy that are on the calls, the willingness that the South African advisor has to try and solve a problem, not just point out the obvious, and sometimes try and mitigate the blame that they have, but they just accept that there's a problem and deal with the problem at the time. We've got, out of 60 million people, 20 million English speakers.
Yeah.
And we're adding about 400,000 new English speakers annually to the workforce. So from that point of view, I think we've got a superior English talent. So absolutely no reluctance whatsoever to place English in South Africa and to place voice in South Africa, more importantly.
Yeah, yeah.
Key feature.
I mean, as far as languages are concerned, is there limitations there, would you say? Or obviously English is a very strong language. Are there other languages which you would focus on, or is it predominantly in English?
Look, it's unashamedly English focused.
Yeah.
And I've mentioned that before. High quality, medium cost, but competitive English service destination. Having said that, we do service multilingual capabilities out of South Africa, but in very small pockets or very small buckets. You know, we've got English schools, French schools, German schools, Italian schools, and other European schools here in South Africa. But the one thing we can't claim is to be in a position to offer multilingual at scale in South Africa, for instance. But what we would do is offer the ability for a client to place a couple of seats here with us, and maybe 10s and 20s, and that we definitely have an ability to service. But I would suggest that it would be far better suited to a nearshore capability for lots of the European languages, and potentially South America, where we also do place quite a bit of work for nearshore USA.
So, Dina, it'd be good to get your perspective, obviously with Brexit, and we hear about the effects of that. Have you noticed that from a language perspective, finding people who are multilingual, have linguistic skills in certain areas?
Yeah, I mean, there have undoubtedly been some challenges. You know, we've had some of our multilingual staff sadly decide to go back to their respective countries. Also, we've seen a reduction in the recruitment pool. I mean, our policy has always been to recruit mother tongue. That's really, really important to us from a quality standpoint, and so that's definitely affected us. What I'd say though, we've offset that with the expansion of our home working capability though, so that's really, really helped fill the gap, if you like, and overcome some of the challenges that Brexit has caused. But you know, I think that's why we later on this year will be setting up a multilingual hub in Europe, really to continue supporting and augmenting what we're already doing from the UK and out of parts of Europe with home workers currently.
Yeah, yeah. And William, would you echo that from a census perspective? Have you noticed that with the move into Eastern Europe, has that helped from a language perspective and offering
Yeah, no, absolutely. You know, and I guess I would highlight here what we're doing in Istanbul and Turkey, because one of the most difficult languages that I think we all appreciate is German to resource for. And Istanbul certainly, with that great relationship between Turkey and Germany, has given us an additional capability, and a very strong capability that allows us to access German. You know, it's headquarters for places like Apple in the region, but also Lufthansa are based there. So it really does give us a handle on that particular language. But yeah, I think, yeah, absolutely, as Dina points out, that nearshore ability, and especially with the work from home, really being able to employ people where they are and allow them to continue to work where they're based, rather than being in a certain radius of our sites, is key, I think, to the next 18 months, 24 months build out of these types of operations in Europe.
Yeah, yeah. I've just had a question come in actually regarding costs. I'll read it out. So in terms of price point, how does South Africa compare to Eastern European market, the Eastern European market? What is the average starting salary for a customer support agent in Bucharest versus Joburg? We're going to talk about pricing and costs, and I think one of the questions I've got was around so average percentage differences between geographic areas. I don't know if you want to answer that one, Robin. Do you want to start with that one, or Phil?
You're on mute there, Phil.
Yeah, there we go.
I'll unmute, and then that would be easier, wouldn't it? So I think,
well,
generally, I mean, from a cost perspective, I find it absolutely fascinating in terms of the range of call it hourly rates across Europe, most certainly across Europe. A real broad variation, of course, And again, I'm sure Robin will comment on this, but we do find the same in South Africa. But I would come back to Dino's point that, you know, cost is just one part of the equation. Of course it is. And what's the most important part? It is delivery. There's no doubt about that. You know, the quality of customer service, or clearly sales. You know, we all know that a cheap hourly rate does not necessarily deliver a low cost of sale. For example, if we were to just focus for a minute on the outbound sales process. But what I would say, just to sort of bang the South African drum, because we've just done an exercise on behalf of a client, which is inbound retention. And we were at pains to point out to the client that, you know, what could be considered a lower hourly rate in, say, South Africa compared to the UK may not equate to, you know, a low cost of retention. In fact, it might equate to a higher cost of retention. And interestingly, what we are finding, and again, throw it over to Robin to comment on this, but we are finding, you know, in terms of delivery and success, you know, superb cost to retain out of South Africa. You know, so the general point is, you know, range of prices across Europe. I'm sure William will be able to comment on that. And then within selective countries, surprisingly enough, you know, we've just done an exercise on behalf of a client whereby in one particular country, we've seen a shift of about 30% from one outsourcer to the other, all of which clearly are very reputable outsourcers. So that's not necessarily the issue. So yeah, no, throw it over to everybody else to comment on that particular point.
Okay, Robin, do you want to give your view?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one thing I just want to state at the outset is South Africa is not a cheap destination. Right? We don't market ourselves as a cost play. I think we're a very medium-priced, quality-driven destination. So, you know, whilst our prices, and if you compare them, not necessarily to Eastern Europe, but let's say compare them to the UK, in general, you'd probably find a 40 to 45% cost reduction in the price per hour. But as Phil was saying, you know, you do find in South Africa at the moment, even necessarily just in other geos, you can get 25 to 30% difference between service providers, between, let's say, Durban and Johannesburg, or Durban and Cape Town, and likewise. So Again, I think it's the choice of the geography. You need to decide what it is you're looking for, first of all, and it's not just necessarily price, because if it's price, it's going to India or the Philippines potentially. But if you're looking for a quality destination, South Africa is a good option. And what we find a lot of our clients do, they have work in the UK, they've got work in South Africa, and they use a blended rate back to their clients. So if they've got a contract, which is the headline contract in the UK, they'll place, let's say, 50% of it out in South Africa. And our experience suggests that they get close to potentially a nearshore blended rate, or a significantly cheaper rate than just keeping it all onshore. But it's definitely not just a pure cost play, for sure. And as Phil was saying, and I think Jonathan mentioned as well, I think what's critically important is to get the brief right when you start. Is what is the expectation of outcome from the client themselves? Do they actually understand what it is they're trying to achieve? Rather than moving the old acronym, the same mess for less, it's really a case of understanding the true essence of what they're trying to achieve, and then trying to formulate with them. We've had opportunities where we've suggested that they should not place all the work here with us in South Africa, but they should entertain a bit of nearshore, for instance, just to complement the entire suite of the solution in which they're trying to engineer.
Okay, and then William, what's your thoughts?
Well, I would echo a lot of what the others have said, and I think it is this idea for the client to keep the main thing the main thing. What is it they're trying to achieve? And I think, if I'm honest, even the term outsourcing and BPO, we're ill-served by those titles because of the complexity and the value we actually bring to partners isn't really reflected in the sort of discussions around where can I get it cheaper, as Robin says, mess for less. It is about actually saying, have you even considered, is doing nothing an option? Have you actually looked at that internally in your organization? Have you modeled it properly? I.e., we're going to do nothing, we're not going to engage in outsourcing. What does that look like? Is it something that we can then maintain and sustain over the life of what might be an outsource contract length of 3 to 5 years? Is the procurement team invested in that vision as well? So it is about what's the problem you're trying to solve, what's the complexity of the scale of it, how will that change over the lifetime of the contract, and therefore, where is the right place for your customers and your customers' engagement that might be a mix of all the solutions we're speaking about on the webinar today.
Okay, yeah. Dino?
I mean, I think everyone echoing everybody's points are valid points through. I mean, I would disagree on one point, though, that I think when an offshore destination is chosen, it's 100% always chosen on a cost play, because there's absolutely no reason to go offshore unless it's a cost play. But look, there are clear benefits. I mean, if you look at South Africa, Philippines, India, these are all well trodden paths. They're well established. The thing, I'm sure we're going to come on to technologies, but
absolutely. Actually, just sorry, Dean, sorry to cut you short. It's interesting. Quite a question was asked by the chat. By the way, if you can ask a question, you could do it through the Q&A. It makes it easier than the chat, just for the audience. But he was asking around new, I guess, up and coming destinations such as Jamaica, Honduras, Nigeria. It's saying for English, Spanish, even French service delivery. So they're asking around considering smaller outsourcers as they're very flexible and can act faster than the bigger players. What's your thoughts on that, Dino?
I mean, look, I think Jamaica's a great up-and-coming destination. I mean, it's, of course, an ex-British colony. English is their first language. They've got very similar cultural tendencies as we do here in the UK. Again, I would say that it's more up and coming. All right, typically, if you take the time zone, Jamaica would typically service the US, with 5 hours behind. But it's actually no different from going to India, where you would start 5 hours later. In Jamaica or elsewhere in the Caribbean, Antigua, wherever you might decide to go, you would start 5 hours earlier. There's a lot of talk around Egypt at the moment to cover both language and provide the cost arbitrage piece. So there's a lot of up and coming destinations, and I mean, this additional conversation I could spend hours on. But
well, Phil, you've probably got a good perspective of this, haven't you?
Yeah, well, I think Dino's absolutely right. I mean, what we're talking about here is, you know, the breadth of potential, aren't we? You know, the world's a relatively small place. You know, when we start looking at the various locations and, you know, I mean, just to sort of echo and sort of confirm what Dino's just been saying, and I'll throw in another country, Dino. I'll throw in Albania, you know, so very, very interesting destination. You know, we've just placed 2 bits of work in Albania with 2 different providers. And clearly, again, William will be able to comment on this, but in terms of language capability, you know, at the moment, Albania, Albania can definitely cater for a multitude of different languages, which is great, is relatively well priced, and the comments that we're getting back from clients that are already out there, you know, because quite clearly on behalf of the clients that we work with and the outsourcers references are taken, the quality of service is exceptional. Now, whether that will continue, we all know that, you know, there are sometimes some challenges in terms of, you know, a multitude of contact centers opening up in selective locations, and therefore, you know, price goes up and the availability of staff diminishes. You know, so no doubt there are certain challenges on that. But I think, you know, again, to pick up on the Kosovo stroke Sarajevo stroke discussion or point that, again, William was making earlier, we've got work out in Sarajevo. Superb in terms of the quality of agent, you know, a war-torn country, you know, agents, you know, went to university across Europe and are now heading back to Sarajevo. So a talent pool second to none, really.
Yeah.
You know, so some very interesting, you know, debates and discussions, I think, around so many different locations, but, you know, everybody has their strengths and the weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, I want to touch on, there's a question actually we've had, and from earlier on, and also it's something I was going to ask as well around the cultural elements. I do want to cover the impact of automation and technology on costs and delivery of service. But I'll just read out what the question is. So for offshore, nearshore locations, especially for UK clients, customers, how do you immerse your advisors in the UK type of culture so they can deliver a similar experience to what they would get within the UK? So, Robin, do you want to start with that one?
Yeah, sure. I mean, South Africa's got a long history with the UK and previously been part of the Commonwealth. There's an obvious deep cultural alignment. There's a number of British expats in South Africa and vice versa. And our largest international client base stems from the UK, with over 60% of our export market being serviced into the UK. We're educated in sort of British English, if that makes sense. And many of our schools teach on the Cambridge system. Many of our universities are affiliated to the UK universities and tertiary education facilities. Our legal and banking system is based off the UK system. And we've got an abundance of UK brands operating in South Africa. So home away from home, really, just maybe with a little bit better weather. But I would,
it's not hard though.
but I would suggest with almost 20 years of offshoring between our geographies, that the cultural alignment between the UK and South Africa is very deeply entrenched. And you know, when we're teaching our advisors and sort of exposing them, especially those who have been underprivileged and unable to travel and unable to be exposed to the internet at a young age, you know, it's a case of immersing them in British culture and exposing them to the nuances of how British people think and how the British mindset works, and, you know, confrontational and pushback and how that all works, and, you know, the levels of sarcasm can and can't be used potentially. So you know, I think we're very good at that in South Africa specifically.
Yeah. So William, I mean, you'll see it from a different perspective with Eastern Europe, with Istanbul and Romania. How does that affect? How do you get a cultural alignment when you be talking to UK customers?
I think, let's be honest, these are all easy, accessible destinations from the UK. You know, 2 hours, 2.5 hours to Bucharest, a couple of hours to Istanbul. So, and it goes both ways. And I think there's a huge amount of cross-cultural alignment and all these things anyway, particularly when you're supporting e-commerce and retail. All of that's on Instagram, all of it's on YouTube through vlogs and all the rest of it. And so the kind of people that work for us are also the kind of people who are the customers of the brands that we support. So there's already a huge cultural alignment. I think what we definitely could all agree on is we're miles away from those kind of cultural alignment workshops that we used to hear about that needed to be required offshore, even offshore. That just doesn't exist anymore. I, as both a customer of banks like HSBC, but also talking to many of the colleagues and former colleagues I've had at global BPOs, the days when those kind of we can't get your culture, I think, for me, I think they're long gone. Certainly nearshore, they just don't really exist in the way. Perhaps it's more the nuance and the subtleties, but even they are now things that I think can really be easily visited because online is so ubiquitous.
Yeah, is that your view, Phil? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, well, exactly the same. I think we have an educational challenge in terms of educating sometimes our customers in terms of the ability of nearshore and offshore partners and their agents to align. But I think that's, relatively quickly overcome just based upon listening to what William and Robin were saying. And we've got, as I say, we've got clients nearshore and offshore in a host of different countries, and we don't experience these sorts of problems. Primarily because, of course, the outsourcers are extremely proficient at that cultural alignment. I think it's just an educational thing with our prospective clients to understand that particular point. So that would be my.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to move on to the impact of technology. We've had a few questions around that, and also the poll results are coming as well. So the poll results, first question we're asking is the introduction of new technology a key driver to reduce reliance on headcount within your business? So again, I guess the question I want to sort of pose is automation, AI, is technology making certainly UK-based outsourcers more competitive? Dino, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, technology is definitely having an impact, particularly the improvements in machine learning, natural language processing, both derivatives of AI in helping to automate and enhance self-serve. Whether it be a concierge bot to sort of capture initial customer information before passing through to a live advisor, or indeed dealing with knowledge management and giving answers in a simple fashion to customers. Of course, that helps reduce AHT and by default headcount too. Is it moving the dial significantly though in terms of overall cost? I would say it's making an inroad, but I don't think we're there yet. But with the improvements that we've got now with AI and the ability to create more intelligent bots, and we have our own bot framework that we do just this at the moment. It's getting better, and it will make and deliver further cost improvements as we go forward.
Yeah. William?
My view on it is very much that over the lifetime of a contract, if you have that right buy-in with the client to try, pilot, proof of concept with technology, rather than decrease straight away any headcount over the lifetime of contract, what I think it allows us to do is help those clients grow the markets that they want to penetrate into without actually having to grow the operational footprint to support it. Because those ways of looking at transitioning away some of the high volume, low value transactions to technology, and therefore leaving really good quality, high value transactions for employees is great. But I think that's more where you've got the right technology enabled CX analytics and insights piece to really help deliver that for the client.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
Can I just comment on that, Jonathan? Do you mind?
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to go to you next.
The other interesting point, and Dino knows this because he was part of the pitch is, you know, as we all know, sometimes there are old legacy established contracts that are in place, which are very headcount driven. I think those sorts of contracts are where a difference can be made, you know, and if the client is prepared to go to market and look at those contracts. So, for example, we've got a big cosmetics client that we work with, which had circa 120 heads based in India, and you know, we nearly moved it back to the UK, and it was down to 50 heads. So that gives an example of, you know, with good technology and application, you know, there is the opportunity for UK to be a destination, you know. So I think, you know, that there's a point with respect to those big established legacy contracts that possibly technology can aid to move them back or move them to the UK or any other destination.
Robert, what's your perspective from a technology view?
Well, look, I think, you know, in South Africa, we've got several leading digital and technology firms, and these organizations are co-creating solutions for the GBS and BPO space, which has got a customer-centered approach. And I think the low-end repetitive work is what we're seeing being replaced, and the current talent and employees are being upskilled and reskilled in new ways to continue to support the customer and ensure brand stickiness. But I think what we are finding with these low-end, low-value interactions, which have been sort of taken over by some of these more automated processes, is that there's definitely still a demand for a higher value voice engagement. You know, I don't think we're going to lose that human-to-human connection, because you know, there's multi-generations that have a requirement to engage with us as outsourcers, and not all of them are really digitally au fait. And I would think that whilst it's got a big play, I support what Dino was saying as well. You know, the fear mongering that was spread several years ago about the fact that within the next 5 years there won't be a call center agent breathing on a floor, I don't really support. I think there's going to be a transition into sort of best of breed technology, and it'll evolve over time. But I think that human to human interaction and the ability for an advisor to do multiple tasks simultaneously will be there, aided by AI, bots, and technology. But, you know, South Africa is slowly but surely maturing in that space, but we are still very much sort of the human breathing warm body on a seat pitch and destination.
Right. Okay. So what we touched on Brexit earlier, but I want to talk about data now. First of all, just looking at data security, are there fewer challenges if you're using a UK-based outsourcer? Dino, what's your views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, the UK benefit is more of a legal and compliance one rather than technological. Yeah, when we look at data privacy, there are certainly fewer challenges when the outsourcer is based in the same legal jurisdiction as the data subjects, as obviously the outsourcer is already aligned to the needs of its customers. If you're looking outside of the UK, you would expect fewer challenges in countries that have a directly comparable legal structure. Or of course, you select a UK company, a company that has a UK parent company as their head office, which can kind of help that. But
how's Brexit affected that? You know, with obviously, I know there's issues around the UK data adequacy, and there's been more news around that. But have you noticed any impacts?
It's had little impact so far, and that's in terms of GDPR, and that's mainly due to interim arrangements. We haven't really seen an impact. I mean, pretty much the UK Data Protection Act copies the essence of the EU's GDPR anyway, so there's little to react to. I suppose what we have to monitor moving forward is the divergence of UK legislation. So, you know, if we do start changing our own legislation, then we might have to reevaluate the adequacy in terms of GDPR.
Yeah, and William, what about, obviously you've got operations in Eastern Europe and also within the UK.
So for us, Jonathan, we now straddle three different data protection regions with the UK, Eastern Europe, and Turkey. And so for us, really, yes, it presents more complexity, but it's complexity that there are mechanisms that we can deal with that complexity. Obviously, if you've got a UK client or you've got a European client and data spread between the different regions, it does, you do make decisions around where the data should actually reside. Should it be in UK or should it be in Europe, in Dublin or Frankfurt? But really, I think for us, it's now almost the first thing that we would look at when we're doing a piece of client work is, okay, where's the data aspect to it? Because it has become so important for us with those protection areas that we now have to service.
Right. Yeah. And Robin, from a South African perspective, how are you, with handling data? Are there any issues there? And what's your view?
I don't believe there is, Jonathan, and I'm not sure that many people know this, but South Africa is also the secretariat and convener of the Customer Contact Center ISO service standards, ISO 18295. And we worked with a global team, including the UK's British Standards Institute. So, the thinking and methodologies in the security framework have been included in many BPR operations. We've got people like Amazon and Azure investing billions of rand in infrastructure in South Africa. We've got our own GDPR equivalent called the POPI Act, which is as stringent, if not more stringent than GDPR. Many customers and operators in South Africa are ISO 27001 compliant and certified. King 4 as a governance model is born out of South Africa and is embedded into our Companies Act. And over and above, we've got a very strict financial controls and a very strict banking system and credit act and control system. So, as far as understanding data security, information security, dealing with the import and export and processing of data, I don't see many issues there at all. I mean, we work a lot in financial services and insurance. I'm an appointed person with the Financial Conduct Authority from the UK. We work as an authorized rep. So we have very close scrutiny and regulatory oversight from the governing bodies like the ICO and the FCA in the UK. So I think it's kept South Africa on the straight and narrow. Okay. And I think if you choose the right outsourcer, and there are obviously multiple outsourcers in South Africa that have the capabilities, you'll be fine.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. Phil, what have you found clients having concerns or not?
Yeah, so I think my point was going to just reiterate what Robin concluded with there. I think it's all about finding the right outsourcer. Around this panel, we've got three fantastic outsourcers that adhere to every regulation and every policy, but mistakes can be easily made by selecting the wrong outsourcer, irrespective of geography, and there lies the challenge. So that for me is the overriding point. As Robin rightly said, it's about selecting the right outsourcer that's got the right processes, not necessarily all the time about the right authorities and regulatory boxes ticked, but definitely processes as well.
Yeah. Okay, so we're getting very close to the end of the session now. One thing we haven't talked about was actually around home working. It'd be really interesting to get your views of how it's impacted your operations over the last 14 months, and if that will continue in the future, and what your sort of how you think your operations will change, possibly whether you'll adopt a hybrid model or continue with how you're working now. So Dino, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we had a reasonably sizable home working contingent before the pandemic, so it was much easier for us to transition to the full home working requirement come the end of March last year. I mean, without doubt, we've seen some fantastic examples of it, great productivity. A lot of staff absolutely love it. I don't think we're going to force people back into the office, but we're going to certainly adopt a hybrid model, and it will all be based around what the output quality and also staff morale and all of those, a myriad of different things. For me, physical locations are still very important, particularly in light of the type of work that we do. The as we know, customer service can be a thankless task, you know. And
Yeah.
very rarely are people making contact to tell you you're fantastic and they love your product. So you know, the environment, the camaraderie, and everything that goes with physical locations, I think, are still very important. But undoubtedly, you know, I'm a big fan of home working, and it'll play a big part in what we do moving forward.
Yeah, yeah. And so Robin, what's from your perspective? What have you, your organisation, how's that work?
Yeah, look, South Africa has had significant success with home working. It's been an extraordinary evolution in us as operators understanding the capabilities of our advisors and the ability to migrate to work from home. It's been extraordinary. I think the one caution that I would give, and the one thing that we're really experiencing now, is that agents that have been working at home for the past several months or year, and I believe that it's across the UK, Eastern Europe, and all over the world, they've spent a lot more time with their families because they haven't had to travel, and they've saved a significant amount of money because they haven't had to pay for transport. The almost reluctance for some of them to come back into the office because they're now having to withdraw from that lifestyle and start contributing again to their transportation is quite a challenge, and something that I think we really need to recognize and find ways to deal with. So that's the one thing. I think the majority of operators in this country will continue to operate with some sort of hybrid model. We had about 85% people working from home at the worst case of lockdown, and we're down to about 18 to 20% at the moment work from home still. But I think it will continue.
Okay. So William, what's your
Well, I'm waving a tiny little census flag here at the moment, Jonathan, because we were a gold winner at the recent European Contact Center and Customer Service Awards for leadership in a crisis, and it really was about what we've done with work from home and all the other elements that came to the fore that were needed as both ability to mobilize and stabilize and then optimize what happened during the pandemic. I think absolutely work from home is now part of the proposition. We haven't really given a shout out really to the UK Contact Centre Forum, but for many years they've run a very good forum called the Home Agent Forum, and I was part of that for a long time. And it was the great myth of UK outsourcing that home working was something that was never spoken about, and yet banks were doing it, and you can almost always tell. One car insurance provider that I use, I asked the customer agent, "Are you working from home?" And they said yes. Could you just hear the ease with which they were dealing with the call? There's just an ambiance around the way they were handling that customer engagement, which could tell you they're working from home. Without a doubt, that's going to be a big play going forward. But I do think the other thing that outsourcers and in-house need to look at is the technology dividend for the employee. You know, where's the employee dividend out of the use of new technologies? It shouldn't all be just about the customers. It has to be that the employee also benefits, whether it's in the way they have employee engagement, and we were finalists with the UK Innovation Awards recently, simply around this piece. You know, how are you making sure that technology is also helping those people in your business to be engaged? And obviously that affects all the things that we like to focus on, retention and quality of care to the customer. But yeah, that's the one thing I would say out of this pandemic, there has to be an employee dividend of the use of technology in our businesses.
Yeah. Okay, so we're going to wrap up now, but I just wanted to ask everyone, or certainly the outsourcers who are involved here, if you've got 3 words. So I'm going to ask Robin, what would the 3 words you would say to the positive words about offshore outsourcers, or why you would outsource offshore? 3 words. 3 words.
3 words. Quality, cost, and convenience.
Okay, over to you, William, about nearshore.
Well, actually, it would be quality, cost, and convenience, very much depending on what it is you're trying to achieve.
And Dean, how to finish?
Goodness. Well, it will be high quality, supreme governance and compliance, and peace of mind.
There you go. All right. Well, thank you very much for all your time today to all the panelists. We've had lots of questions. We probably haven't managed to answer them all, but we'll try and get back to you. We will be holding future sessions around on this topic because there's a lot to talk about. but I think it's been really, really interesting and insightful. Following this session, we'll send out a link to the video recording. So if you want to watch it again or pass it on to somebody else to watch, you can do that. But thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye-bye.